Cannons firing, muskets, smoke-filled battlefields, gunpowder revolutionized warfare. Before its arrival, the battlefield was a visceral, intimate theater of clashing steel and straining sinew. Knights in shining armor, the aristocratic elite of medieval armies, dominated the field, their heavy cavalry charges capable of shattering infantry formations. Castle walls, painstakingly constructed over decades, stood as near impregnable symbols of power, able to withstand sieges for months, even years. Warfare was a slow, grinding affair, dictated by the seasons, the strength of force, and the endurance of men wielding swords, spears, and bows. The longbow, a formidable weapon in its own right, could pierce armor at a distance, but it required immense physical strength and years of dedicated training, making skilled archers a valuable and limited resource. The social order was reflected on the battlefield. A peasant with a pitchfork stood little chance against a trained, armored knight, reinforcing the rigid, feudal hierarchy. This was a world where personal valor and martial prowess were paramount, where a single well-armored nobleman could be worth a dozen common soldiers. The clang of sword on shield was the definitive sound of conflict, a sound that had echoed through the ages. But a new sound was about to be heard, a deafening roar that would not just echo, but shatter this old world entirely. The invention of gunpowder, a simple mixture of sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate, is one of history's most pivotal moments, though its exact origins are shrouded in the mists of time. Most historians trace its discovery to 9th century China, where, in their quest for an elixir of immortality, accidentally stumbled upon this highly combustible formula. Initially, it was used not for war, but for spectacling fireworks and celebratory firecrackers, delighting imperial courts with flashes of light and sound. The Chinese soon recognized its military potential, developing early fire lances, essentially bamboo tubes packed with gunpowder and projectiles, which acted as primitive flames. These early thermal weapons were designed more to terrify and disorient the enemy than to inflict lethal casualties. They were cumbersome, unreliable, and dangerous to their own users. Yet, the seed of a new kind of warfare had been planted. Knowledge of this black powder slowly trickled westward along the Silk Road, that ancient network of trade and cultural exchange. By the 13th century, the formula had reached the Islamic world and Europe, where scholars and military thinkers began to experiment with its properties, not for fireworks, but for propulsion. European innovators, building on Chinese and Arab knowledge, were the first to truly grasp its potential to hurl a projectile, leading to the development of the first true firearms. The transition from a fire-spewing lance to a projectile-launching cannon marked the true beginning of the gunpowder revolution. The first cannons to appear on European battlefields in the 14th century were monstrous, primitive beasts. These early bombards were often crudely cast from iron or bronze, more akin to giant metal pots than precision weapons. They were incredibly heavy, difficult to transport, and notoriously unreliable. Firing them was a hazardous ordeal. The imprecise metallurgy meant they were just as likely to crack or explode, killing their own crew as the enemy. Loading was a slow, laborious process involving ladles of loose powder and a heavy stone or iron ball rammed down the barrel. Their accuracy was abysmal, making them ineffective against mobile troops in an open field. However, these crude machines had one undeniable, terrifying quality: immense power. When aimed at a static target, like the wall of a castle, the results were devastating. The medieval fortress, wheat eats, egg-thin walls, designed to repel ladders and archers, was suddenly vulnerable. For centuries, a well-built castle could withstand a siege indefinitely, its defenders safe behind stone curtains. Now, a single cannonball could smash through masonry that had stood for generations, creating a practicable breach in a matter of hours or days, not months. The psychological impact was as significant as the physical damage. The thunderous roar of the cannon was the sound of a new, impersonal form of destruction, a force that rendered centuries of architectural and defensive strategy obsolete. Feudal lords who could once retreat to their impregnable strongholds now found themselves exposed and vulnerable. The balance of power between a besieging army and a fortified defender had been irrevocably tilted. As the technology of gunpowder advanced, so did its impact on the open battlefield. The development of smaller, More portable firearms, like the arquebus and later the musket, began to change the very nature of infantry combat. Initially, these early handguns were clumsy, slow-firing, and wildly inaccurate. An arquebusier might take a full minute to load and fire his weapon, a period during which a longbowman could loose half a dozen arrows. The weapons were heavy, required a forked rest for support, and were susceptible to damp weather, which could render the powder useless. In a one-on-one duel, an armored knight with a sword was still far superior. However, armies soon realized that the strength of firearms lay not in individual skill, but in massed volley fire. A block of musketeers, firing in unison, could unleash a devastating hail of lead, capable of tearing through even the thickest plate armor. This was a critical turning point. The knight, who had trained his entire life in the chivalric arts of war, whose expensive armor made him a walking fortress, could now be brought down by a common peasant with minimal training and a musket. The social and military hierarchy was upended. Warfare was no longer a contest of aristocratic champions, but a grim calculus of firepower and attrition. Formations evolved to counter this new threat, leading to the pike and shot tactics of the 16th and 17th centuries, where blocks of musketeers were protected from cavalry by dense formations of pikemen. The battlefield became a more structured, yet far more lethal, chess match of smoke, lead, and steel. The Gunpowder Revolution triggered a cascade of changes that extended far beyond the battlefield, reshaping societies, economies, and the very concept of the state. The production of cannons, muskets, and vast quantities of gunpowder required a level of industrial organization and financial investment that was beyond the means of individual feudal lords. Only centralized monarchies and emerging nation-states could afford to build the foundries, train the engineers, and raise the capital necessary to field a modern, gunpowder-based army. This economic reality accelerated the decline of feudalism and the rise of powerful, centralized governments. Kings who controlled the new artillery train could crush rebellious nobles by battering down their castles, consolidating power and forging unified nations. Standing armies, composed of professional soldiers paid by the state, replaced the temporary feudal levies of the past. This required new systems of taxation and bureaucracy to manage logistics, pay, and supply, laying the groundwork for the modern administrative state. The art of war itself became a science. Fortifications were redesigned with lower, thicker, star-shaped walls, the trasse italienne specifically engineered to deflect cannon fire. Military academies were established to teach geometry, ballistics, and engineering, transforming the officer corps from a hereditary aristocracy into a class of educated professionals. The smoke-filled battlefields of the gunpowder era were the crucible in which the modern world, with its powerful nation-states and industrial-scale conflict, was forged.